Okay, so in our last session we talked about DOM, and then we talked about some of closures and module design pattern, and then we talked about some of the element methods, and I have showed you how to work with your DOM. Okay, you have your document as your inbuilt object. It contains various methods for you to access your to play with your HTML elements. If you wanted to set dynamic text, we can do a lot of stuff using that. Okay, you can get hold of an element by using element by an ID or by name, by class name. Okay, you can even dynamically create elements. You can use your append method to append to an existing element, or if you want, you can append to your body as well. Okay, so these are some of the methods that I have showed you. To get the text content, we use the dot text content after you get an element. If so, if you want to check if there is an attribute available on a particular element, you can do that. You can use your inner HTML to set the inner HTML of an element that you are trying to create. Okay, let's talk a little bit about JavaScript event loop, and then we'll go over that a little bit more. So understanding your JavaScript event loop is actually very important, because you need to understand the async nature of your JavaScript. So how JavaScript actually works. Okay, so this is an example. So the way it actually works is you basically have two functions. Very simple. Have your first function which is consoling I am first. Have your second function which is calling your first function, and then it is executing itself. It's like a method calling another method, right? Very simple. And you call your second function which will execute your first function, and then will print out I am first, and then it will print out I am second. So the way the flow happens here, you can think of this like a stack, because each and every operation has to be added to the call stack, right? It's very similar to your any programming language. So your methods will be added to your call stack. Okay, and your stack basically is last entered one will first get out. So that's your stack operation, LIFO. It's last in first out. So initial state, you have your, this is your initial state of your stack. So let me shut this guy out. Okay, that's your initial state of your call stack. You have your anonymous function, which is basically is your main.js. I mean, it's so when your browser running this particular file, so that's the first one basically is your anonymous function in main.js. And after that, that is basically calling your second function. If you see, that is added on top of your anonymous main.js. And then your second function is calling your first function, and your first function basically is added. And then your first function will be removed and will get executed, right? And once your first function executed is finished, it will print out I am first on your console. And then you have your second function get popped out, and then it will print out I am second, and then your script execution is complete. Okay, it will print out your I am first, I am second, and then your everything is good. Now this is how your synchronous programming actually works. Okay, if everything is working in a synchronous fashion, this is how it actually works. But if you add some async behavior to your functions, let's say you use your set timeout or set interval, so these will get executed in future, right? They don't get executed right away. So based upon the timeout value that you have set, so they will be executed in future. So that's where your event loop actually comes into picture. So let's take a look at a modified example here. We have your second function here, and then you have your set timeout. Your set timeout is set to 5 seconds. So after your 5 seconds is complete, it will execute your first function. Okay, so when your JavaScript executes this particular piece of code, so it basically executes your second function and figures out, okay, I have a set timeout call. Okay, then it will have to execute your I am second console log statement. So let's take a look at how your call stack actually behaves. You have your anonymous function, same as the one on the top. You have your second function, and then you have your set timeout call, correct? So your JavaScript also has something called two other components that we need to be aware of. One is your event table, the second one is your event queue. So in the case of your set timeout or set interval, so which will execute in future or executed in an asynchronous manner, so these two components will come into picture, your event table and your event queue. Okay, so when your set timeout is popped out from your stack, so then the set time mode has to wait for 5 seconds and then it will have to execute your first function. So your JavaScript creates this event and then will populate your event table with that particular function that needs to be executed after 5 seconds. So when your event moves from your call stack to your event table, your timer will start going off. Okay, so it will go from 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1. So when the time is ready to execute this first function, your first function will get added to your event queue. Okay, your first function moves from your event table. Okay, where is it? Okay, if you see here in the background, the event table is constantly monitoring whether any of the events have happened to trigger moving functions over to the event queue. So from here to your event table, once a timer is going off, once a timer is done, it will move to the event queue. That's what he's trying to say. Okay, now your 5 seconds is done. So it will basically go to your event table and then your first function is added to from your event table, it moved to the event queue. So another important thing is your JavaScript thread that is executing this particular code, it will not wait for your event table to complete. Okay, it will just finish whatever it is doing. As once your set timeout function is moved to your event table, it will finish executing your second function and your main.js. So they will not wait, they will finish it off. So they will be, if you see, if you see it move to the event table, your second function is popped out from your stack and is executed, and it will printed out I am second. So when this function is executed, if you go back to the code, so before executing your first function, it will print out I am second, because this is a deferred execution and it will get executed in future. Okay, so from your event table, when the time is up, it moves to the event queue. So now your event queue, what it actually does is, event queue actually have a ticking mechanism. So what it does is it actually checks, okay, so is my call stack is empty. Okay, now here if you see your first function, your call stack is empty, your JavaScript is not doing anything. So now what it does is it moves your first function to your call stack. If you see, it moved to your call stack and eventually this will get executed and it will print out I am second already printed out, and then it will print out I am first. So this concept of moving your async events from your event table to your event queue and back to the call stack, so this concept is called event loop in your JavaScript. So that's how your async functions gets executed in JavaScript. Okay, so if somebody asks you to explain your event loop, this is how you need to explain your JavaScript. All your asynchronous calls move to the event table, and when the time is ready to execute those functions, they will move to your event queue. So meanwhile, your JavaScript will continue executing. It will not stop until your events move from your event table to event queue. It will finish whatever it is trying to do. So now the other thing that people ask is, okay, once my event queue has something, so if your JavaScript is doing something, will it stop and then execute whatever it is available in your event queue? It does not. It will have to finish whatever it is doing. So whenever your call stack is empty, so that's when it will move from your event queue to your call stack again. Okay, if you see it's empty, so it moved here, it will get executed. It will wait, yes. Even though 5 seconds, so it's not guaranteed that your function will execute in 5 seconds. If your JavaScript is doing something, it will still wait in the event queue. It will not execute it right away. Okay, your call stack has to be empty, so that's when your event queue basically moves it. Your event queue has something like a ticking. So it will call process.nextTick. So it basically, for every tick it checks, okay, is my call stack empty? So if call stack is empty, it will move your items from your event queue to your call stack. Okay, this is how your events basically gets executed internally by your JavaScript thread. Okay, this is a very good article that I found, so which diagrammatically explains how it actually works. So I have that in the doc. You can just read over it to understand a little bit more about how your event loop works in JavaScript. So you'll hear like Node.js event loop, because Node.js is JavaScript. So event loop is not Node.js related. It's actually related to JavaScript. Okay, so that's what is your event loop. Now let's talk a little bit about your events. So far we have basically looked at all your DOM things. your events is another very important thing that we need to understand for your DOM. So an event could be like a user action that a user is performing on an input or on a web page. So there are two types of events. One is your keyboard event. The second one is your mouse event. Have your keyboard event. Next one is your mouse event. Your keyboard events, some of the examples are of your keyboard event, like key press, key up, key down, are a couple of examples that I can think of. Your mouse event could be click, hover, or some of the stuff, blur. There are a couple of examples of your mouse events. Okay, so when some of these events happen, you wanted to do something, you wanted to execute a function in JavaScript, you can actually do that. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can actually do that with some examples. Alright, so here is my events HTML. It loads your event.js file, and then you have your, so this is how there are a couple of ways to attach your events to your HTML elements. One is you call the function directly on your paragraph or any HTML element you have. If you just do control space, you can see all the different things that you can do: on error, on focus, on blur, on drag, on drop. So we have like bunch of events that you can do. So when such an event happens, you wanted to run a function. Okay, here like on mouse over, I wanted to execute a function. Here I am passing this. This here refers to that HTML element itself. Okay, so there are a couple of things that you can pass here. One is your this. This refers to the HTML element that raises the event, and you can also pass event object here. You can say this comma event. So that is actually the event that actually happened. We'll take a look at that event example in a little while. So understood, here you have your handle mouse over, handle mouse out, on mouse over, on mouse out. I wanted to run some functions. Now let's take a look at what these functions actually does. Here if you see, we have an inline style defined here. Style is color white, so the font color would be white. And then you have your background color of your body is an orange color, and the font color is white. It basically has some text. And here I have another paragraph with article, and I have a div which contains your inner div. We have your outer div and inner div. Alrighty, let's take a look at your events.js to take a look at those two functions that we have: handle mouse over, handle mouse out. So here if you see what we are trying to do, we have in the element, this here refers to your element. We are passing that this here, which is your element. We can access the properties of the element. You can dynamically change your element properties. You can add styles, you can remove styles, you can change the text of your element, you can do all of that stuff. Here what I'm trying to do is, I got the element, I'm saying like, okay, I wanted to change the inner HTML from some text to mouse over. Okay, and I wanted to change the background color to red. The same way I have your handle mouse out. I have the element. I wanted to change the text of the element to mouse out, and I wanted to have my background color to be green. So you have your handle mouse over, handle mouse out. Okay, let's run that to see your behavior. Okay, you have your some text. If you see, it appears in white. Okay, now let's put your mouse on it. If you see, I got my mouse over, my text is changed. I removed my mouse, I got my mouse out text in green background, and I have the font color as white. Okay, that's your mouse on, mouse over. This is how you basically do events. Either you tie up your events to your HTML, or there is another way to do it. Let's take a look at an example. So the other way that you can create events, you can use your add event listener method to attach an event to your button or whatever that element that you wanted to attach. You can use your add event listener method. So here I say document.get element ID. Okay, find the article element and add an event. So the event that I wanted to add is a click event. Okay, when that click event happens, I wanted to execute a function called handle click. So here is my handle click event, a function that I wanted to execute. And if you see, I have a parameter called event here. So this event parameter gets populated automatically. You can log the event to see all the properties of your event. Okay, so this is how you can instead of doing that on click, on hover and stuff on mouse over on your HTML, you can programmatically attach events. So this gives you a clear separation, so that way you don't have any JavaScript code on your HTML. So rather, all the JavaScript code is inside the JavaScript file itself. So you'll not see all that on mouse over, on click, like on mouse out and all of that stuff. So you can programmatically attach it. Okay, this add event listener method works in only IE 8 and above. So if you are using IE 8 and below, IE 7 and below, you have to use an attach event method. So your add event listener works only in your IE 8 and above. I mean, IE 7 is long gone anyways, so you don't have to worry about it. But just for your knowledge, so you have to use attach event method if you are using lower browsers. Okay, so this add event listener method actually takes another parameter here. So that parameter is true or false parameter. Okay, the property is called use capture. You can set that to true or false. Okay, so you basically have, we'll talk about that, what is that capture does actually. Okay, so for now, let's say that click event, when I click on it, so I'm going to execute a function handle click, and then I'm going to log the event. Okay, let's take a look at your events HTML. You have your paragraph article. Okay, let's open our console. Okay, my console is good. It does not have anything. Okay, now I hover on that. Is that okay? Have your some article. I clicked on it, so I got my mouse event created. So your mouse event, this event basically have various properties that you can see. So these are all the properties of your event. So it tells you more information about, like, which element actually raised the event, and you can also figure out, okay, your mouse position, okay, the coordinates of your mouse and other stuff from the screen X, screen Y. So we have a bunch of properties that you can take a look. You can actually print out here if you say the current target is null. So ideally this should have a value. So it's not printing it out. Let's log it out to see which element raised the event. And just say console.log event dot. I think you should see the target property. So is the target is populated. MNOPQRST. Here is a target attribute that actually raised the event. This target and current target should be the same. Event.target. The target we already seen. Let's try current target. Current target. Okay, let's refresh that one more time to see what logs out. If you see, the current target is paragraph. So it shows you as null inside your console. But if you see, it's not really null. It actually is the current target is your article, which is same as your target. I'll tell you what is the difference between both of them, because we need to talk about event bubbling. So that's where these two attributes actually changes. Alrighty, now let's talk about an important concept with events. So you understood your basic event handling. So how you basically can tie up events or functions when you perform an action on your HTML. So these are especially helpful. For example, you wanted to validate the user an input that as the user is typing it. You can do that with your key up and key down events. So all of that stuff you can actually perform that. Okay, now let's talk about your very couple of important concepts, which is your event bubbling and event capturing. So let me show you. I think I opened a page which actually shows a little bit about a diagram. I think which will be better to see. So these are a couple of things that actually happens. So your event bubbling is actually very simple. So let's say I have a div. Inside that I have another div. So I have a click handler on my both my divs, element, my inner div as well as my outer div. When I click on my inner div, what will happen is your event get bubbled to its parent. That means the event gets propagated to your parent as well. If you have a function that is defined for your click on your parent, that will get executed as well. This is called event bubbling. Your event bubbles up to the parent elements. That's your event bubbling. Your event capturing is your event actually propagates down. So when I click on my parent, my event get propagated to my child as well. So your event goes down, whereas your event bubbling, your event goes up. Okay, so let me show you an example. So here in my events HTML, I have a div. This is my div. I have an outer div and I have an inner div. So I have my ID as div1, I have my ID as div2, correct? So let's go to your events.js to see the ones that I have for those two. Come on, here it is. I have my div1, add event listener, click, function, I said alert of div1, and let's change this to false, both of them to false. So when you set both of them to false, that means this is your use capture attribute. So that means you are basically testing your bubbling. So by default it is false. Even though you don't specify anything, the default value is false. If you want to use capture, you basically set that to true. Okay, so you understood the function here. So here we actually defined the function and we gave the function here, the name of the function. Here we are actually defining the function itself. I wanted to alert div1. Your alert is basically, I don't know if I have already talked about it, actually shows a pop-up window on your browser. Okay, we'll take a look at that. You have your click. When the user clicks on your div1, it basically executes a function alert of div1. I'm adding an event listener. And I have my second event listener for my div2, which is your inner div, which executes your function on your click event alert of div2. And then you have your false. Alrighty, let's save that. So the important thing is when I click on my div2, my event gets bubbled up. It will alert div2 as well as div1. Even though I have explicitly said, okay, execute this function only when there is a click event on my div1. Because of your event bubbling, what will happen is your event gets bubbled up. Okay, here is my inner div. Okay, I click on that inner div. If you see, I got my div2, div1. If you see, my event get bubbled up. Alrighty, now let's try your capture. Let's set that to true and true. I wanted to do my capture. Okay, let's click on inner div. If you see, I got my div1 and div2. If you see, the capture event is coming down. Okay, whereas when I set it to false, my event bubbling, my event get bubbled up. Okay, understood your event bubbling and event capturing? This is one of my favorite interview question. Difference between event bubbling and event capturing. So here I have given you all the combinations that you can have. If you set your div1 to true and if you set it to false, so event capture will be on. If you set your div1 to false and your div2 to true, so your event bubbling is on, because here you have false here. So that means here you're basically saying false for your capture. So it'll by default it will enable your bubbling. Ideally you either use both trues or both falses, but you generally don't do one true and one false. But here I gave you a little more information about, okay, what if you set it to true and false. If you set it to true and false, div1 as true and div2 as false, event capture is on and div1 and div2 will be alerted. If you set your div1 to false and div2 to true, your event bubbling is on, div2 and div1 is alerted. Okay, so that's your event bubbling and your event capturing. Your event capturing, your event goes down. That is your event bubbling, your event goes up. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about your event propagation. So how to stop bubbling from happening. Okay, how to stop it. Let's take a look at an example for it. So here I have a similar example. I have an outer div and I have an inner div. Inner div, text is inner div. I have my two divs, outer div and your inner. Let's go to your sp.js. Here I have my inner. I have a click event, function of event. I have alert inner event 1. Okay, I have event.stop propagation. I have my document.get. If you see, I have two events here. Same event for my inner element. Okay, I have my inner. I have a click event on it. I wanted to alert inner event 1. I have the same one here. Click event on it. Alert inner event 2. So likewise, you can have multiple functions that you wanted to execute for the same event. You can do like this. You see, these both are exactly the same. Okay, so that means you have two click handlers on that particular click event. So when you click that inner div, it will execute this function as well as this function. Okay, now let's comment this out to see the default behavior. So understood from here to here. So we have two functions on the same element for the same event. Click, and this is my parent one. Outer div. When a click event happens, I wanted to execute a function alert of outer event. Alrighty, let's run this to see what happens. So now this is your default behavior. I think I need to go to a different page. Let's close it out. sp.html. Let's load that onto your browser. So inner div. Let's open developer. So I think I'm not consoling anything, just alerts, right? Okay, I don't need that. Okay, I click on inner div. If you see, I have inner event 1, inner event 2, and then I have outer event. That's your bubbling, right? So it executed the two events that you tied onto that click for your inner. It did inner event 1, inner event 2, and your outer event, because it executed both the events on the element as well as it executed your parent event because of bubbling. So if you want your bubbling to stop, it's very simple. You just say event.stop propagation. You do event.stop propagation. You're basically telling, don't propagate the event to my parent. Okay, I don't want you to propagate the event. So you do event.stop propagation. Okay, now let's see the behavior. Have your inner div, have inner event 1, inner event 2, done. So your outer event did not happen because we stopped the event from propagating to its parent. Okay, stop propagation. Here you can also do event.cancel bubble equal to true, but that's for your lower browsers, which does not support stop propagation. You use event.cancel bubble equal to true. That's for your IE 7 and below, I guess. Okay, so you need to understand the difference between your stop propagation, stop immediate propagation. Your stop immediate propagation is actually an important one. So what does the stop immediate propagation actually does is, so here if you see when my first event happened, so when I said stop propagation, it alerted out inner event 1, inner event 2, and it didn't alert out your outer event because it stopped the bubbling from happening. A stop immediate propagation is if you have two events on the same element, only one event would be executed. After this, it will stop executing anything else on that element as well. It will stop your bubbling as well as it will not even alert out your inner event 2. You're basically telling that, okay, if I have multiple events on that element, just execute this event, stop everything else. Inner div, inner event 1, done, stop. Okay, understood your stop immediate propagation? If you have multiple events on the same element, it will execute only the first event. After it encounters that, okay, event.stop immediate propagation, it will not execute anything else. It will stop your bubbling. It will also stop any rest of the other events on that element, because you can have multiple events on the same element as well. Okay, understood your propagation and immediate propagation. This is one of the interview question as a lot of people ask. What is the difference between stop propagation and stop immediate propagation? Event capture, event bubbling. So these are some of the frequently asked interviews on events. Okay, now let's take a look at I think I need to have okay, here is another event that I wanted to explain. So you have your form here where you have a text box and then you have your input type equal to submit. Okay, when you click on your submit, if you see I have an on submit event on my form. On submit, handle submit, I wanted to execute this function and I wanted to pass my event object. Here if you see, you have to type in exactly event. If you just put anything else, I think it won't work. Okay, you handle submit and you can pass your event. Okay, now let's take a look at your handle submit function. This is a form submission. So let's say there could be a requirement where you wanted to do some client-side validation where you wanted to verify that, okay, user entered everything correctly. Okay, if user has entered something properly, you wanted to stop the form from submitting. So the way you can kill the event, if user has entered something wrong, you can actually say event.prevent default to actually stop the default action of your form. Let's take a look. Handle submit. Here you have your handle submit. You have your console.log of event. I'm logging out my event. Here I have event.prevent default. So this is generally used to prevent your default actions on your clicks, on your form especially, where you wanted to stop the default action from happening. Okay, your default action of your form submit is to submit the form to the server. If you don't want that from happening, you can do event.prevent default. Okay, so let's take a look and see what will happen if I don't have event.prevent default. Okay. Okay, let's clear out some of this stuff here. Okay, let's enter some value. Okay, I click on submit. I don't know if you see the URL actually changed. You have a question mark here and then you have your city value got erased because your form is submitted. Of course, we didn't write any logic on the server to handle your form submission. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll stop the default action from happening. Go to your dom.js. You say I want to stop that default action. If you say event.prevent default. Okay, let's refresh the browser one more time. Let's enter some value. Click on submit. If you see it logged out your event, but it didn't submit your form. If you see, the URL was already there. This URL. We see your URL doesn't change as well as your form is not submitted because programmatically you killed that event that actually happened. Use your event.prevent default. You generally do this whenever you wanted to do some validations before actually submitting the form. That's when you do it. You say event.prevent default. Okay. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about your current target and target attributes. What is the difference between them? So these are especially handy when you have your event bubbling in action. Okay, your event dot target and current target properties will get populated. So whenever there is an event happened on that element. Okay, let's take a look at an example. So you have your outer div and your inner div, right? And you have your handle click, and I'm passing my event here. Handle click of event. This is how you pass it. You can do event comma this. If you wanted to access your div, you can basically do this. So here I just wanted to pass the event. I'm going to just say event. Okay, handle click of event. I'm going to console the event out, and I wanted to print out the target ID, current target ID and your target ID. Okay, let's run that to see what happens. Okay, let's clear out this guy. Click on your inner div. If you see, it says like, okay, my mouse event is raised. The current target that actually raised the event is your inner div. If you see, your current target and target are same for your inner div event. But if you see your outer one, your current target is your outer, but your target is your inner. Your target always refers to the element that actually raised the original event. Your original event was raised by your inner. You understood your target and your current target? For your inner, they both are the same. But for your outer, because your outer hasn't raised the event, your target is inner. Whereas your current target is your outer. Okay, this is another popular interview question. Difference between your target and your current target in an event object. Okie dokie. Alrighty, let me make sure that I taught everything that I wanted to taught on your. Okay, now let's take a look at how to debug your JavaScript. This is one of the very important thing that everybody needs to know. Debugging your JavaScript code. Okay, here I basically I created a form here where the user enters two values, A and B, and then I click on my submit. My submit, if you see here, my form has an on submit event. It will execute your compute function. It will pass the event, and then I have a div here. This is where I am going to show the result of the computation of my sum. Okay, here let's say I enter two numbers here. I'll do an addition operation, I guess, in my compute function. Here if you see, I'm basically saying I don't want my default action to happen. I'm killing the event. And here I'm accessing my form. The way you get it is document.getElement by ID, the name of the ID of your form, which is your compute form. You can always do this. This always refers to the form element as well. But here I wanted to show you a little variation here. I got the form. And I'm saying like, okay, out of my form elements, okay, I have two elements with the name A and B. Here if you see, I have A and B as a name attribute for my two inputs. I captured the A field, I captured the B field, so since these values will come as a string, and I'm going to convert that to an int by using my parseInt method. ParseInt A field dot value plus parseInt B field dot value. Okay, I'm just printing them out here, the sum of these two numbers, and then here what I'm doing is I'm basically accessing my result div. That's where I wanted to show my result, and I am setting the text content property. Okay, now I'm calling the sum function, which is defined here, and I'm passing both the values, A field value, B field value. It's just consoling A and B and resulting your A plus B. Okay, it just takes a value and then set into your result div. Okay, and then it will print out console.log finished executing sum. Okay, just addition of two numbers. We are just getting the values entered by the user by using from your document. Okay, let me know if you have any problem understanding this two functions. So we call the compute function on the submit event. Okay, we prevent the default action. We get your element with ID compute form. We got your form. From there use your form.elements is an array. From there you say, okay, give me the element with name A, elements with name B. I got my A field and B field, and I'm getting the values, the user entered values, and I'm passing that to the parseInt function. ParseInt function gives you the integer of a string. That's just consoling it out. So here actually I'm passing we can comment this out, we don't need that. We have your text content equal to sum of user entered values. It will give you the sum of two numbers. You take those value, whatever the result, and set the text content of your result div, and then you just say console.log finished executing sum. Okay, so let's load our debug.html to see how it looks. fast HTML. Okay, let's close out these two guys. Okay, I go to my developer tools. Okay, I got, let's enter, let's say 10 and 20. Okay, let's click on submit. If you see, I got 30. It consoled out 10 and 20 values in your sum function. It printed out finished executing sum. If you see the value here, 30. Okay, this is how your function execution is. Now what I wanted is I wanted to debug my program to see how this is actually working. In some cases what will happen is you click on your submit function and nothing happens. Okay, the first step that I would do is I would basically put a breakpoint. You go to your sources section of your developer tools. Here you can see your HTML file as well as your JS file. You click on your JS file. Here I'm going to put a breakpoint. Okay, you just click on it. You see this is your breakpoint. The breakpoint is basically you're telling your browser that okay, when you execute your function, stop here. Don't go further. Okay, and here on the right hand section you can see the call stack. You can see the variable values. You can see the breakpoints here. Okay, if you want to disable breakpoints, you can just uncheck it, so that would go away. Okay, and some of the other stuff here. So now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on my submit function. Let's enter some other value here. I'm going to say 11 and 20. Click on your submit. If you see, it stopped right there. Event.prevent default. Here if you wanted to observe the event properties, you can see that here. Okay, these are all the event properties that have been set. It will also print out all of the stuff here, but you cannot see everything. So you just hover on it and you can see that here. You can also see that under your scope here. Local scope. Your local scope is your function scope. If you have anything on the window, you can also watch them under your global scope here. Okay, this is your event. You can expand this to take a look at whatever is here. So inside this particular function, it also tells you what is this here. This here refers to your window object. Understood? This, if you write something like this dot something, this refers to your window object. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the next line to see what is going on. Here, so this question mark here, it basically goes to your next line. I mean this arrow here, it's not really a question mark, arrow. Okay, this is step over. You have your step into, step out. So these are the commonly used ones that you pretty much use. You have this one, it tells that deactivate all my breakpoints. Okay, and then here it says like pause on exceptions. If there are any exceptions you wanted to stop there, you can also enable that. Now I'm going to go to the next line. If you see that my blue cursor is kind of like moving. Now it's no longer at your event.prevent default, it's not right now here. Now you wanted to see your compute form value. Okay, right now it hasn't executed that yet. It just stopped there. That's why you have undefined here. So let's execute that one more time. Now if you see your compute form is set, you hover on it, you can see the compute form value. Okay, understood? Now I'm going to go to one more line. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go here. Now you can see your A field and B field. A field is your input. You can see the value. MNOPQRSTUV. So what is that value? A field input. Here is the value. Value is 11 on your input. Okay, you can observe the values. Okay, whether I am getting whatever I entered. Okay, am I getting those values here or not? Okay. Now we have a console statement that will just log out to your console. Now you go to your console, you will see that value here, 31. You go back to your sources tab and then continue your breakpoint. The next one, here step over. So what it will try to do is it will not, if you wanted to go to this function, instead of doing a step over, you have to do step into. Now I don't want to go there. So it already executed that function and you can see the values. 11 and 20 got consoled out from my sum function. Okay, and then it will finish. You can just click on this one, or you can just click on like, okay, resume script execution. It will finish executing it. Now what we'll do is we'll take a look at your step into as well. You understood this one right here, step over? You're executing your program line by line. So this is same for your Java as well. You put your breakpoints, you have your step over, step into, step out functions available in your Java as well, in Eclipse. Okay, let's do the same operation one more time. Let's change the value. Okay, submit. We stop there. You go until your line 7. Let's do a step into there. Okay, I'm here. Now let's go to step into. Now if you see it, now it moved to your sum. Okay, I have my A and B values. I can see, okay, I have say, okay, 12 and 20 looks good. Now what I wanted is I don't wanted to execute these two lines because I know how they actually works. They are simple. Now what I can do is I can do step out. Or if you wanted to execute this line by line, you can always do this one right here. If you see, it moved to the next line. Now what I can do is I can just say step out, and then it stepped out of that function. It finished executing your sum, and then you have your console.log. Finished executing sum. You click on this guy, it basically finishes it off. Okay, now I got 32 on my browser, and I can disable my breakpoint. I no longer need it. This is how you debug your JavaScript code. Okay, you do it inside your browser. So your developer tools is your friend. So this will help you to identify any issues. The first thing, like when you write a function, if it's not being executed, or if you are not getting the desired output, the first thing that you wanted to check is, okay, is there a typo? Because if you put a breakpoint here, when you click on this button, it's not coming here. So that means it does not know that, okay, it has to come here. So there could be some problem here, or in your name of your function, or there could be some problem in your HTML. Maybe you typed it wrong. Okay, so those are a couple of things that you always have to look for. And here again, if you're not getting A value and B value, you need to make sure that you have your A and B here. You have to use so that's why you have to do copy paste as much as possible here. If you write the function first, just copy the name of the function and put it here. If you write the compute here, just take it and then put it on your function. So that way you don't have your typos. Most of the time, like, you'll see these issues because you have a small typo. Okay, so understood your debugging? Alrighty, nice. Okay, that's how you use your developer tools to debug your code. Alrighty, now let's talk about your window.onload. For that, let's go to your dom.js. Okay, so here what I have is I basically have this is regularly your head tag, your body tag. If you see, I have my script tag towards the end. So the reason, because I wanted to execute my script after my entire DOM is ready. Because if you see your dom.js, because the way the browser behavior is, so when it basically sees that script tag, it does not wait for your HTML parsing to be complete. It will execute your dom.js right away. So when it executes your dom.js right away, if you put it in the head section, it will try to get your demo div, your all of these stuff. It might not be there. It might not be there yet. So you will get undefined. Element is undefined because you're doing undefined.text content. You'll get your element as undefined. So in order to avoid that problem, what we can do is we can always do we can wrap up all the code that you have written here inside a function. We can basically do window.onload. I think it's equal to function, I guess. And then you wrap up all the thing that you wanted to execute. After the window is ready, you can wrap them inside a function. Okay, and then you can indent it. So that way you know that okay, all of these is inside a function. Your window.download, what it does is it waits for your images and everything to be rendered, so then it will execute it. Okay, it will wait for your entire HTML parsing is done, then it will execute your script. And now I can move my script.js to my head tag. I don't need to put it inside here. And you can use those two properties, that async and defer properties, but for some reason when I did that, it didn't render out my document.write for some reason. Maybe might have to do something with document.writes. I still have to research on that, but this is how you generally do it. But starting HTML5 you don't need it, window.load or something, because you can just copy the script from here and put it on the top. You can use your async and defer functions. Here I can say defer. Your defer is a way of telling your browser that execute this script after HTML parsing is done. And if you put async here, it basically tells that okay, you try to load this JavaScript file. So when the JavaScript file is loaded from your server, you stop your parsing and then execute it. That's what your async actually does. Whereas your defer, it will wait for your entire HTML parsing is done, then it will execute your script. That's your async and defer properties. Alrighty, that's your window.onload. So we don't have to use that anymore because of HTML5 changes. Okay, now let's talk about AJAX, your asynchronous request in JavaScript. Asynchronous requests in JavaScript. So by default, JavaScript has everything is synchronous. So there are few functions that gets run asynchronously. You have your set timeout, set interval. So those are a couple of functions that we have already seen. Your JavaScript, so the reason why we use AJAX, right? For example, if AJAX basically helps us to perform partial page refresh as one of the popular use case. Partial page rendering or refresh. So by default, every click on your browser is synchronous in nature. Okay, when you click on it, it will submit your whole page and your browser gets refreshed or repainted. In some cases, what happens is you don't want to do that. When I click on this, so I want just to show something or show and hide, or for example, let's say, and a good example is, let's say you have your country drop down. Let's say you have two drop downs. One is just say is a country drop down, and the second one is a state drop down. Based upon the country selection, you wanted to populate your state drop down. If I select US, for example, I wanted to populate my state drop down with all the states in US. If you select India, you wanted to see all the states of India. So if you do that in a synchronous fashion, what will happen is on country selection, it will load your entire page. But just populating a state dropdown, you don't have to execute everything in a synchronous fashion, because loading your entire page means you have to load your images. You have to make further requests to get all the things that you have already got. So instead of doing that, you basically do a asynchronous request. A good example of async request is your Google. You go to your google.com, you type in something, you have your suggestions, right? So that is AJAX. Okay, you go to anything, you go to amazon.com, you perform a search. So as you are typing, you can see the search results. That's async. So everything happens in an asynchronous fashion. So pretty much now all the websites that everybody builds now is asynchronous in nature, because your synchronous is a little, it's time consuming, as well as it does not give you better user experience. Okay, so that's why we basically use your asynchronous request in JavaScript. Okay, your JavaScript actually provides an object that actually helps us to perform your asynchronous request. It is called XML HTTP request object. Your XML HTTP request object is actually used to perform your asynchronous request, to execute your asynchronous requests from your JavaScript. If you are using your IE 7 and below, you basically have to use another object called ActiveX object. Okay, because your XML HTTP request object is not available in lower browsers, you probably have to use your ActiveX object to create your asynchronous request. Okay, now let's take a look at an example of how to actually perform an asynchronous request or AJAX. So pretty much all of your jQuery AJAX or your Angular JS AJAX, they are built on top of your browser HTTP request, XML HTTP request. So behind the scenes, it actually does an XML HTTP request. So the full form of AJAX is asynchronous, JavaScript and XML. You can make an asynchronous request and get the data in the form of XML or JSON, or it could be anything. Whatever your server sends, you basically get it. It could be an image, it could be a PDF, or it could be anything. Okay, let me show you an example here. I have my ajax.html. Here I basically have an on-click on I have a button. I wanted to load a document. I wanted to request a document from my server. I have a button, type equal to button, on-click equal to load. So by default, your button does not do a synchronous request. It actually, if you do button type equal to submit, it will try to submit your form. But here I wanted to execute a JavaScript on the click of a button. So the ideal one is choosing button type equal to button. On click equal to load doc. I wanted to execute a function called load doc. Let's go to your load doc function and see what it is doing. Alrighty, so I need to uncomment out this code here. Let's comment out this one. So this is my load doc function. The first step in load doc is it's creating your XML HTTP request object. Right? This is the one that I talked about. We create your XML, use your new, create your XML HTTP request object, and then we'll talk about this one right now, a little later. But here if you see, the request type that you wanted to perform is of type get request. So when you are using HTTP, so you can actually perform different types of requests. The first one is get, you do post, you do put, you can do patch, you can do delete, you can do options. These are some of them. Okay, these are the type of requests that you can send from your browser to your server. You can send your get request, post request, put, patch, delete, and options. The commonly used one are your get, post, put, and delete. These are the commonly used one. Okay, so here I am making a get request. See, the name itself says it's get. It used to get something from your server. So what I am trying to get, I am trying to get a file, ajax.txt file. If you see, I have my ajax.txt right here. So it contains some Ajax is not a programming language, blah blah blah. Ajax stands for your asynchronous, some text content inside this file. I have my ajax.js. Okay, so here this property here, you can, the last property here, you can set it to true or false. True means I wanted to run this request as an asynchronous request. You can use your XML HTTP request to actually do a synchronous request as well. You can actually do that. Here if you do false, that means it's a synchronous request. So since I wanted to do an asynchronous request, I have the value as true. I wanted to make a get request to my server to load the file ajax.txt. So understood this line? HTTP XML HTTP.open. Okay, and I use my send method to send the request. Okay, after the request is sent, what will happen is your state of your request changes. It toggles between multiple states. Okay, you have your ready state. So here, if, for example, here this function is it's saying like, okay, this is like an event. So whenever there is a change in the state of the request that I just sent, execute this function. On ready state change, I wanted to run this function. If the ready state value is 4, and if the status I got from my server is 200, 200 means it's a successful request. You have different HTTP status code which indicates that, okay, if your request is successful or not. You might have seen when you open a browser, you will see 400, 404, 500. So those are all your HTTP status codes. Your 200 category, all are your success codes. 200 means it's success. Okay, once my request is successful, so whatever the response I got, okay, and I wanted to set that to my demo div to its inner HTML. Let me move this to the top line so you'll understand that bit better. So whatever the response I got from my server, I wanted to set it on my demo div. Okay, if I'm doing an inner HTML property, and then I'm taking whatever I got, I'm setting it to my inner HTML. Okay, this ready state, we can actually see how this actually state changes. Let's take a look at the possible values for it. Ajax. You can read more about Ajax from your developer Mozilla documents. So the ready state values has basically 0 to 4 values. Here it is. 0 means the request is not yet initialized. 1 means okay, the server connection is established. 2 means the request is received by your server. 3 means your server is still processing the request. 4 means your request is finished and the response is ready. Okay, your ready state will change from starts at 0 and eventually once your request is complete, it will basically move to 4, which tells that okay, request is finished and your response is ready. Okay, understood why we are doing this dot ready state equal to 4. 4 means my request is complete. Now I have a response. I can take the response and I can set it to my inner HTML. This ready state actually changes. We can actually see that by putting a breakpoint. Well, let's run this and see what actually happens. Ajax.html. Okay, let's run this guy. More tools, because I wanted to see the request that is actually going out. You can actually look at that request that is going out from your network tab. You go to your network tab. Here you should be able to see all the requests that are happened. If you see when I refreshed it, it actually made 2 requests. One is for your ajax.html, the second one for your ajax.js. Okay, now let's click on that add content. If you see, when I said add content, it made a request to load my ajax.txt file. You can click on it. If you see, the response status is 200. Type is an XML HTTP request. Okay, the amount of data it loaded is 424 bytes. The time it took to get the response back is 6 milliseconds. You can click on it. You can actually see a little bit more about your request. Okay, this is the URL that got executed against my server. It's a GET request. I got 200 OK response. This is the IP address. That's where the request is sent to. And you can see your request preview and your response basically. That's your response, the response preview and your response. And you can see your timing, how much time it took to get the data. Okay, this is how whenever you are making a request, you wanted to see what happened to your request. You can go to your network tab. You can find the request URL that actually performed and you can see the status of it. Okay, now let's add your debug point to let's put a breakpoint here at line 4. Okay, let's load that HTML one more time. Okay, now everything we are starting fresh, correct? When I click on this, it will execute your load doc. And I wanted to see what actually happens. Let's put a breakpoint here as well. Okay, so let's click on that add content. Okay, now it is right here. It's creating your HTTP request object. Right now it's undefined. Move to the next line. Okay, on ready state change. So this is like an event. The same way you have your click event and other stuff, right? The same way you're telling that, okay, on this object, if the ready state actually changed, I want you to execute this function. Okay, moving on. If you see, it didn't go into that function yet. The reason because your ready state hasn't changed yet. Okay, then I open my xhttp.open. Okay, now when I said open, if you see, your ready state now is 1. Okay, so let's do that one more time. Okay, it executed it. Now we have your xhttp.send. It's sending the request. Now it's back to your function. Now you can see your ready state now. Ready state is 2. Execute that one more time. Okay, now your ready state is changed again. It's 3. Now you have your ready state is 4. Your status is 200. So it will go inside. Set your HTML with the response that we got. You can see that is a response that I got from the server. Okay, and then it finishes. Okay, understood your async call? So your understanding Ajax is very important, because as a developer as a UI developer, pretty much all the requests that you send to your server are async in nature. The ones that you try to get your data from, all the data that you get from your server, we do basically in an async fashion. Okay, that's your Ajax. The function here that will get executed after your event is complete, this function in JavaScript is called as your callback function. The same way, if you remember the DOM events that I showed you, so the function that once an event is complete, the function that it gets executed is called callback function. So this function is a callback function. This function is a callback function. Okay, so this function here, the name of the function is called callback function. After your event execution is complete, what needs to happen is defined inside your callback function. So you'll see that you will hear that name very often. So now you need to know what is a callback function. A callback function is a function that executed after an event is complete. Okay, now let's change that to false and see what happens. I have a fascination of changing that to true. Let's keep it true first. Let's do a console.log. Console.log finished executing a load doc. Because this is an async function, your console statement will complete fast, because it does not wait for your response to come back from your server, because this is async in nature. The same way as I showed you the event loop, event table and event loop, this is what exactly happens. This Ajax request will get added to your event table. Okay, when you have your response came back from your server, this function execution will be moved to your event queue. And once a call stack is empty, this function execution will be moved to your stack and will get executed. So that's how it actually works. Okay, let's take a look. Let's also add a console statement here. Console.log. Hey, got response from server. Alrighty, let's refresh that one more time. If you wanted to see whatever the changes that you have done is actually there in your browser, you can go to your sources tab always. You can look at your code. That's your Ajax file. You see I added got response from server, finished execution load doc, all of that stuff. Let's remove those breakpoints. Let's see what happens. Let's open your console. Let's click on your add content. If you see, my function execution is finished and got response from server, it happened later. Okay, because that's an asynchronous event. So your JavaScript does not wait for your async response to come back. It will move on to your next steps. Now let's change that to false and see what happens. Now we are telling it to do a synchronous request. Let's refresh that one more time. Let's go to sources to make sure that we have that to false. Let's go to your console, click on your add content. If you see, I got response from server, finished executing loadup. See, saying like synchronous on main thread is deprecated, it's no longer used. You see the deprecated term, that means it's no longer used. I just played with it. Okay, so understood your synchronous and async request. In your synchronous request, it actually waited for your response to come back and then your function execution is finished. In your async request, if you set this to true, this is a very good example of your event loop that I talked about in the beginning, where this callback function execution will be queued up to be executed later once a response is ready. Once the call stack is empty, this function execution gets moved to your call stack and will get executed. Understood your async callback function? What is a callback function? Okay, I'm going to stop there. We'll talk about your ES6 tomorrow. Fun part.